All right, we'll give everybody another minute or so to hop on and then get started.
Sounds good.
Okay, 7:01, and we've got a full agenda, so let's go ahead and get started. Jose, if you could put the agenda up on the screen. All right, so we've got a few things today we're going to try to get through, and I realize our track record of getting through the agenda has declined during the last few meetings. So anyway, that's totally my fault, but let's see if we can get through the agenda tonight. First, we'll go through the compiled sections. Then we're going to have a discussion just to, if not to see where there's consensus, ready consensus, at least to flag major issues for task force discussion, any of the issues within those areas that the section leads would like to raise. And then most of the evening will probably be looking and talking at the land use section that I believe Lynn has a PowerPoint presentation to go through. And I see Tammy's hand up. Yes.
John Carter is trapped in attendees.
Ah, all right. Got free John Carter there.
Thank you.
I'll bring him up.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. And then, and that is a pretty full agenda. And I guess before we get into the agenda, just a couple of housekeeping notes. This is our last scheduled meeting of the task force for now. It is the end of July. We didn't quite reach our goal of wrapping everything up by the end of July, but we've made a lot of progress. So we are going to be taking a little summer break and restarting in September. So anyway, we'll be talking a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But one of the things that we'll be doing, and I know some of you who are and I think maybe all of you who are section leads hopefully saw this, as the section leads go through the compiled section document here in a minute. What we'd like to do is get a sense from both the section leads and then from the task force in general, if those sections, specific sections, are mature to the point of there will likely not be major changes by the task force in those sections through to the end. The reason that we're trying to do that, and also to try to flag the major issues for task force direction. During the August break, there will be a good amount of staff work going on in the background. What we'd like to do is use this month for those sections that are pretty mature, that they're pretty far along. Like to have staff do a more in-depth look at those sections and then come back to the task force with feedback in September. So that'll be one of the things. We're obviously going to be doing that on a rolling basis going forward. But you know, one of the things that I want to make sure that the task force gets the full set of feedback from staff and any suggestions that come from staff before you finalize the report. So at this point, I'm not looking for any final votes on sections or putting the final vote on, obviously not the task force report overall, but more of a sense of which sections are mature to the point of getting that type of in-depth staff feedback. Also, just as another housekeeping note, during the summer break, staff will be available to discuss, answer questions, provide verbal feedback, and talk through issues. And I would encourage, especially, of course, open to any one of the task force, but especially section leads who might be having some questions. I would encourage anyone to contact St. Clair or Chris or any county staff regarding that. Obviously, they're also my office is available as a resource as well during the break, but I wanted to make sure that that everyone sort of knew the process going forward in terms of what will happen during this break. Otherwise, I would encourage everybody to, well, frankly, to take a little bit of a break from this. We've been going really hard and fast the last few months, especially, and I know a lot of you spent a tremendous amount of time and energy pulling all this together. So, anyway, does anyone, before we start with the agenda, does anyone have any questions, suggestions, comments going forward? Tammy, I almost thought your hand was up, but it didn't quite get. But that's only because I can see you on the top of my screen. I don't see any electronic hands up.
I think Mark Malcolm has a hand.
Oh, there we go. Okay, Mark, I didn't make it that far down the screen yet. Mark, go right ahead.
Yeah, both ways on that hand up and chat hand up.
Okay.
It may be helpful in the to plan how this the product of the task force not only is reviewed by the county staff, but how do you intend to bring it to the public a little bit before it goes to the Board of Supervisors? Because there are some issues that have not yet been addressed. I've failed on a couple of them with transportation side of things to really stress. I've brought them up a couple of times, but I guarantee you that it would be helpful to get some greater public input than what you've had from the task force members representing elements of the public. So having that path forward understood would be very, very helpful.
I agree completely, Mark, with what you just said. Yeah, the plan is this, and we haven't yet pulled the trigger on any of it yet because we're not sure when the task force report will be done. But the plan is to take 2 to 3 months and just focus on public outreach. So we would be doing a series of town meetings across Reston, different cluster associations, or certainly the polo fields. We would want to do. I'd want to have a town meeting there, and I would, as we get closer to that, I would encourage any task force members who would like to participate in that or present portions or even perhaps all of the task force report. Definitely would be looking for volunteers to help with that. We do want to make sure that this isn't just, and especially this is, I mean, frankly, we've been doing this all through COVID. You know, it's been online, and on the one hand, it does allow for a little bit easier participation in some ways and viewing in other ways by members of the public, but it's not the same as the face-to-face meetings. Hopefully, knock on wood, our COVID pandemic doesn't keep us from doing some of those in-person outreach meetings in the fall, or as soon as we're ready to do that when the task force wraps up. But that will be a big part of the post task force, but pre-planning commission, pre-board of supervisors timeline.
Supervisor Alcorn, greatly appreciate that. You had an email, I believe, from Rick Hamilton within my neighborhood, which gives a question about that public process, how it can be a concern to be more effective than some of the things that have been in the past. And it's working through that kind of process really would be helpful to you. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mark. And I did respond to Rick this morning and told him a shorter version of that. Basically, be happy to hold a town hall meeting on the task force report, but also to get feedback on what people think should change, if anything, in the comprehensive plan for Reston. So yeah, thank you, Mark. Any other question about the process or going forward through the summer and beyond?
Walter, this is Mark.
Hi, Mark.
One question in terms, or I guess following on Malcolm's question, in terms of analysis of the work that's been done to date. I know staff is going to be working, you said, through August. I guess there are certain technical components to all of this, be it stormwater, green building, affordable housing, transportation, other things that where this group is identifying things that they'd like to see. Is the staff going to be commenting on those elements as part of this process? And similarly, how do we get civil engineers and others who work in this field day to day to participate in that review as well?
Good question, Mark. And I think the short answer is yes on the staff side. Chris, I don't know if you want to address that in terms of maybe the type of feedback that staff might be providing. Oh, Chris, you there? I see you're unmuted. Chris might be double muted. Let's see.
Are you talking about to Chris Paperton?
Yes.
He asked Sinclair to take his stuff, I think, in the chat. but I don't-
Okay, St. Clair, are you
Yes,
available to address that?
yes, so I can jump
Sorry.
in. Oh, no, no problem at all.
Thank you, Tammy.
So yes, staff will be reviewing, whatever language recommendations are presented to staff. And then staff will first be providing feedback as far as kind of, identifying what works. If staff has any questions, concerns, we'll be providing the feedback to the task force that we can, continue to work, in shaping anything before we get to the point of draft language or any a staff draft or anything like that. So that's what through August and through September what staff will be doing. And again, just as the supervisor mentioned, as if task force members need to reach out for staff for any additional info questions, staff will be reaching out to kind of the topic area leads. Yes, if there's as we're announcing, if there's any questions or anything like that. But yes, staff will be providing kind of general feedback on what is presented, identifying things that might need, further, analysis and things like that as we move forward. Is that helpful, Mark?
I guess maybe I'm thinking to go one step beyond that, which is, for example, on stormwater management, when the Tyson's plan recommendations were being developed, the industry was sort of, I shouldn't say the industry, not the development industry, but the civil engineer industry were, I'll call it party to that conversation about, what works and what doesn't work from a design standpoint. And my question is, at what point is it appropriate to bring that group of folks into the conversation about sort of how do you actually design these things in the field? Obviously, the SDID staff and the stormwater staff have some knowledge of that, but the question becomes sort of when do we drill down on the details about percentages of reuse of water, as an example, right? Like at what point does that break even or that feasibility question come into play in this process, or is that going to be left to when the staff report's already written and the public comment period comes forward?
I
Just
mean,
as an example.
Yeah, I guess my thought would be, the sooner the better. So I think even during this time, as staff is reviewing, is that something, and I can speak internally on how, the Tyson's process was handled. I don't know if that's the task force would be reaching out to kind of civil engineers or staff, but I think that is something we'd want to be looking at kind of during this next phase as we're reviewing and providing feedback rather than waiting till later.
Okay. All right, that's helpful. Thanks.
I don't think we can hear you, Supervisor Alcorn.
Yeah, I told a joke and nobody laughed. I thought it was really bad. I was saying that Mike Rolban retired, so I didn't know if there was anybody else that does this sort of thing. But it is true. He was very involved in Tyson's work. But Mark, I would encourage if you have folks that let's contact them. And I think perhaps like St. Clair said, maybe.
Right.
Maybe as well, there would need to be, as part of the public outreach, special outreach to some of our more technical folks
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking somebody like a Rob Walker, the co-chair of the, I guess, chair of the P&Z committee, as an example, who's both a Reston resident as well as somebody steeped in that field. And so, he's one, and just like Manny Pacquiao or some of these older fighters, we can pull roll band into from retirement if we need to.
All right, Mark, I'll let you try that one. Well, anyway.
We just need to find him when the fish aren't biting.
Yeah, I know. Good luck. Okay, thank you, Mark. Other questions on the process going forward? Okay, let me just say one other thing, and then we'll get going into the agenda. You have all spent so much time and effort really getting into this stuff, and I know for some of you it's not even your first one of these task forces. But what I would want to do as well is to take advantage of the knowledge and the experience, the insights that you've gained during this process. I would also, if you are interested, or as you are interested, keep this group together through the plan monitoring phase. So that's typically how the comprehensive plan process works the best. There's a task force that puts together the recommendations, like what you've been doing, and then through the plan monitoring phase, which is the years after the comprehensive plan is adopted. There are many ways that plan monitoring can be done. Sometimes it's more of a staff-driven activity, but in this case, I think it might be useful if you are all interested in having this group be part of the plan monitoring process, so that periodically, and I'm not saying every 2 weeks, thinking more of maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, that this group gets back together and gets an update from staff and to see how things are moving forward with implementation of the updated comprehensive plan. So anyway, just to let you know, for those of you that are interested in continuing to be involved, I would very much like to see this group continue in that way. Any questions on that? And you don't have to say right now if you want to do it or not. Be thinking about that.
So
Then I
Walt,
see your hands up.
I was just going to say, I've got my hand up. So in talking about coming back and meeting with staff and seeing how implementation of the plan is going, I was just wondering if if we're going to have any assurances from staff and from builders, developers that are agreeing to certain things. How do we go through and do a punch list, for instance, to say this was done, this was met, this was delivered? Because I think if we're going to wait a year, it's going to be too late. I think things will slide under the radar, and people forget, and I just don't know what measures and M&Ps we might have in place to ensure that that these things get delivered upon to the community.
Well, Lynn, I would encourage you to think about that as part of
Okay.
the task force recommendation.
Okay.
Because there may be some things that are more plan implementation or oversight monitoring, if you will, that would be very appropriate, I think, as a task force recommendation. And as that process goes forward, I think, and I mentioned earlier the public outreach process. I was thinking in the fall that might still be a little too ambitious. We'll see. But once we get to that public outreach, there may be a couple of different documents that folks would want to look at. There may be a set of proposed comprehensive plan updates to the language in the comprehensive plan. There may be also recommendations that aren't plan language updates, but are related to the comprehensive plan and or just very important to the task force. So that I don't want to lose where there is, especially where there's consensus on the task force for doing something or other like that. That would be, let's make sure we keep track of that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Anyone else? Oh, I
Walter,
see Michelle. Yes.
yeah. Hi. I was wondering, to that end, for the Reston data dashboard, is there some way we can incorporate use of that site to monitor how we implement the plan? I mean, I think that's the intention, but I wonder if we can't also just really figure out as a group exactly which indicators we want to look at closely.
Say, Claire, did you set up this question? I don't know if you did or not, but
No, I didn't set it up.
Okay, go ahead.
But yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, the kind of Reston dashboard, I mean, that is really the goal of the dashboard. This was something that came out from I believe it was phase 2 Reston master plan, the idea of creating this Reston dashboard. So again, it really is going to be, the information is going to be provided if, parks, transportation, the zoning cases, is really going to be what helps you kind of monitor what's happening and what's coming based on the plan. You'll be able to see as park sites are approved where they're going to be. So I think yes, it would be a good idea if the task force wants to kind of identify, what are the key things they want to focus on. Yes, but yes, that's the whole purpose of the dashboard, to give you the ability to do that.
Can we reference the dashboard in the plan language too? I mean, I think in the latest draft of equity that we were working on, there are a couple of different areas where we'd like to monitor progress. And so I wonder if we can't say specifically, and this is where the data should live when we get it.
I think that's something we can definitely take a look at, as the dashboard is a fairly new tool that we have. So previously, yes, it has been mentioned, but I think that's something we can take a look at internally to see what's the best way to address, identifying kind of data that is key as far as implementing the plan.
Thank you. I think you're unmuted.
Thank you. I'm having that problem today. But Michelle, thank you for asking that. And I think the data dashboard request that you just made about putting it in the comp plan is a good example. It may go in the comp plan, but it also may be something that goes along with the comprehensive plan that we want to make sure we get public input on, and that there's a record of it, in terms of implementation. And Tammy, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Walter. You had a mandate by the Board of Supervisors to have this Reston comprehensive plan done by a certain date, did you not? And is that still holding, or did we get a reprieve from COVID, or how does that work?
I haven't asked.
Oh, okay. They've got enough
So,
other stuff.
so Tammy,
I thought it was in January, but
yeah, it was 12 to 18 months, but we've kind of blown through that. I mean, we have an excuse with COVID. So I'm going to ride that one for as long as I
okay.
can. But but thank
Thank
you for
you.
asking,
I
Tammy.
didn't mean to make trouble. I just wanted to know, when we can look forward to that coming forward and, the hearings and so on and so forth.
Yeah, we definitely, I know we've been working to really move things forward and have in many areas, but yeah, we do need to move as we can after the break. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. Anything else? Any other comments, thoughts on process anyone wants to share? Okay, all right, then let's go through. Jose, could you put up the compiled sections document, which was shared with task force, I believe, late this afternoon. Is that correct, Jose?
Yeah, did send the document out this afternoon with the revised agenda. Give me 1 second. All right, scroll down. All right, hopefully everyone can see my, oh, went away. See my screen. So again, these were the topic areas, and then I added planning principles at the friendly suggestion by Tammy. I totally left that out last time and provided the link there. I know Lynn was going to present slides on land use, but Lynn, did you have an update for this, or I think that's part of the discussion tonight?
Yeah, that is going to be part of the discussion.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you.
I know last meeting we spent some time talking about transportation. Sorry, there was like a thunder where I'm at. So this is Annandale, so you guys don't have to worry about it in Reston. John Mooney, did you have a quick update on transportation? I know we'll be talking about it with the list of issues in the second part of the agenda. John? We can come back to.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, there you go, John. Go ahead.
I have the same syndrome as Walter tonight here. Jose and I talked about this and agreed that getting yet another version of the transportation document out would be a waste of everyone's time. It would just add more stuff. More helpful, I hope, is the list of issues that I've been handing out. And I think, Jose, you sent out an amended version of that to the task force?
Yes,
So
on Friday.
if you've seen that, we started with 8 and we ended the meeting with 2 new ones and the big finale. So the 2 new ones were Jennifer Dustruck's question whether we could come up with a substitute text for the resolution method for resolving LOSE non-attainment since we've eliminated LOSE. So that's one issue that we want to talk about. And Gary Maupin asked whether we have enough information about access to metro stations in the text. I'm prepared to talk about both of those if we get to it. And then the final one, the big one, is to vote on the entire chapter. So that's we have 3 issues left.
Thank you, John.
Obviously, when we vote on the entire chapter, people may bring other things up that are not in the now 10 issues.
Thank you, John. Parks and open space is, I can't see my participants. Is Jennifer on?
Neither are here tonight. So
Oh, okay. Okay, we can skip that and go to the next one. David Vanel, did you, I know last meeting we had issues trying to get you on. Did you want to provide a quick update on housing?
Sure. On the housing thing, I understand we're on a little bit later in the agenda, but for the purposes of this updated document, compiled sections document, the section for housing is a few days too old. I updated the thing and sent everybody a document dated the 23rd, two documents dated the 23rd, and that should be the one that appears in the compiled sections because it's substantially different, substantively different in content from the original one. But other than that, I don't have anything to add. We'll talk about it when I get my time later on.
Thank you, David. And I think I made a typo. I didn't change that to July 23rd, but it's on the document, the right one. But I'll double check it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Charles Colby, did you have an update on public facilities?
No, I'm still waiting for input from agencies, which St. Clair was going to reach out for me. What I was wondering if I should do just to keep it moving along is in the next couple of weeks, I could just prepare something and put a placeholder for areas that require input, and then there would be something for people to review. And I know we're not meeting next month, but at least to have it in the plan. Do you think that would be helpful?
I think that's somewhat of a good idea as you're getting information during the August break.
So an example is I might not hear from the school system about schools, so I just go ahead and base it on what I know and what was in there last time, and then just make a note of it.
Thank you, Charles.
Okay, great, thanks.
Can I comment on that, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Tammy.
Yes, Charles, we had the schools come and tell us what they needed. So if you want to make your job easier, what is different about Reston? What do we not have that we need? And what are your recommendations to get that stuff? Don't try to do, the Bible on the different things. So we've had the school system has been here. So, either you can go back and get the name of the people who came and talked and call them directly. If staff isn't getting back to you after 3 weeks of asking them, you've got to do that. The other thing that will not probably show up that needs to be in the public facilities sub chapter is sewer and water. I just looked at the McLean master plan that was just turned in, and I think it's approved, and their sewage is now going to Loudon. So obviously what used to be the county back in the day used to tell us in this plan, don't worry about sewer and water, almost like it's an infinite supply. It is no longer that case, and we have to be environmentally very sensitive to this. So when a lot of people are developing and people want to get these approvals, we need to pay attention to that particular public facility. And that's all I'll say. But call the police yourself. There's departments of, and they'll give you
all the time.
They know this stuff.
Yeah. Okay, and I don't want to go outside of channels or whatever, but I mean, I'll be willing. I can just go ahead and I can go back. I'll review the school one. The sewer and water, I was not in there last time. I haven't a clue what goes in something like that, but I can go ahead and take a shot at some language about, needing to verify that, the sufficiency of infrastructure. I was thinking maybe doing something like that.
And Charles, we can also get you in touch, or St. Clair can, with folks in sewer and also Fairfax Water.
Yeah,
including there's actually a $100 million appointee to the Fairfax Water Authority.
That would be helpful. It wasn't in there last time, but I also realized we're kind of doubling and tripling the population, so we don't want any surprises. And the only other thing was, you know, a lot of the things in there are already addressed. They're already there, you know, like the human services and police, and I reviewed that. So it didn't look like much was there. The only thing that I seemed to be maybe an open issue was if there was any need for housing for transient people or homeless people, or if that even belongs in here. But I figured this might be the time to address. And I think in the North County Center, I think there's already homeless people living there where the parks are going. So this would be the time to address it, but only if it's appropriate.
I think David Vanel is covering that, so I don't think you need to touch it. And so will equity.
Which section? The housing?
The housing, yeah. His
I reviewed
section
it. I
is,
didn't see, I wasn't sure I saw it, so I'll go check it again.
David, do you agree with that? I mean, he shouldn't be in housing. Public facilities are fire, police, water, health and human services, schools. We don't need to worry about courts. That's a county system. It's not in
You
Reston.
have shelters there.
Well-
And I wasn't even sure of the status. The shelter, I think, is private, but on county land. If I'm mistaken, let me know. And then the only other thing was if there was, since there's county land there now, is there anything for other types of shelter? I just wanted to address, I didn't want us to end up like other places where it becomes a controversy.
No, Charles, I did not do anything with shelters in the housing section. I that is, to my mind, that is a completely different funded, different mechanisms going on there. And I focused on affordable and
Right,
workforce.
that's what I thought, yeah. So I'll get my stuff, I'll get things together and have it, you know, before we all return. And maybe there'll be an opportunity for people to look at it, but this is all good feedback. Anything else I should be aware of? Cool, thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Michelle Kimmel, did you want to provide an update on equity?
Sure. Let's see. So we have a new draft that I'm hopeful we can send around within a day or two that provides some more metrics and more specifics on equity, and that would be written as a standalone chapter. It's I think pretty close to finish, but our intention, I think, also with equity was to update it as we see the language that's included in other chapters, as a lot of what we've done will be referenced throughout the plan. So I think we could say that, you know, it's close to finish for the small group, but we'll have edits made to it based on what we see from everyone else.
Thank you, Michelle. Tammy, I know that the energy environment was going to be updated and
Yes, and we were meeting on Wednesday. Bill took off on Thursday and he'll be back on Wednesday. So I promised him I wouldn't send anything out before he approves it, but that's very, very close. And it should be out to the task force no later than Friday.
Okay. Thank you, Tammy. Chris Daniel, Heritage Resources, and I know we'll talk about it in a
Sure.
little bit.
We're going to talk about the one item later, but there has been an updated version. The only changes that were made to that updated version were principally the clarification that Jan asked for regarding North Washington Plaza and the known heritage resources table. We updated that. Additionally, I reached out to staff to talk about the question that was raised regarding ground disturbance and what that entailed. And in talking to county staff, particularly with the folks in the archaeology office, it was ground disturbance and development that required county permit and approval, or anything that required a zoning action. So nobody digging in their flower garden or, you know, putting in a new mailbox in their yard that doesn't require those things has to do a archaeological or a historic property survey of that type. So the county staff point out that other sections of the plan, it's a little bit more detailed, and I think it's just in the last update that got watered down a little bit. So we've made that change to make that a little bit more clear for folks. Other than that, we've only got the item that we were specifically going to talk about. So I'll leave it that discussion till later. So to try to keep the clock moving.
Thanks, Chris. Community health, Michelle, did you want to provide an update on that one as well?
Sure. So for starters, I think we already sent around an outline a few months ago. So that outline can be incorporated into this compiled document. We've been working on this. We have some more language, and we're thankful to the data that was sent over by staff. We're also very fortunate that we have on staff the author of How to Write Community Health in a Comprehensive Plan, Anna Ricklin. And so we are in a hopefully a very good place to have something that will reflect, as Tammy said, what Reston has and what we need to continue really prioritizing health in the community. So again, we have an outline. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to send around a more thorough draft, certainly by the end of the week. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Charles Kapoor, I know Gary Maupin couldn't attend tonight. Did you want to provide an update on economic development?
Sure, absolutely. I know that the version that Gary shared last week incorporated the most recent edits and updates that he received from folks on the task force. Traded emails with Gary earlier today. No additional feedback or additions were provided to him. So the version from the 21st is still the most current and active version we have.
Okay. Thank you, Charles. And then finally, public health. I think Tammy, we circulated that updated.
Right, and that's public art because it's community health, and I don't know about that. Yes,
yeah.
that's ready to go. It's a couple paragraphs, and you know, we have had no other comments. Michelle is putting some things in the equity that blend seamlessly with our paragraphs. So that's what I know there. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. All right, I think so. We got through that part of the agenda. And Supervisor, I think the next part was to kind of talk about the list of major issues for task force direction.
Yeah, go ahead, Jose. Thank you.
Yeah, so Chris Daniel, maybe we can start with heritage resources first.
Sure. I think I may have hoisted myself on my own petard with that one when you asked for them, and I don't think I didn't see many other folks provide stuff, but the one issue that came up during our heritage discussion, at least the lengthy one we had earlier this month, was there was a section in which I added some sneaky language that was trying to leverage the ability for heritage resources to get more consideration by developers. What we see a lot is, at least in my profession, development comes in, heritage resources are considered roadblocks or eyesores or things that they don't want, and so they want to demolish them. And when I speak of heritage resources, I am only referring to those properties that are actually designated on the Fairfax County list of sites. So they have to go through that process. I'm not just talking about something that obviously we may think it could be one. It has to actually be determined one. And so the language we had in there was pretty, I'll say bold, but I was trying to be bold and trying to make it that there could be far flexibility when the preservation and reuse of a heritage resource was being pursued as part of the development. In the revised version, we've definitely changed that to be very specific that it may be considered in the application's calculation for FAR, meaning that it is not, is not a guarantee. It is definitely something up to discussion, obviously, and I think it's particularly leveraging that on county staff and then particularly the Board of Supervisors and the appropriate boards that make those decisions. It's not leaving that to just, oh, well, if you happen to preserve and reuse a heritage resource, you're guaranteed that FAR flexibility, which I was perfectly fine with making that change. The real thing is I want that carrot there because I feel like that carrot encourages a developer to consider the option. If they still don't, they still don't. We'll document the heritage resource that gets demolished, or typically that's what happens, and move forward. But this is at least a incentive. That's my salvo on it. I just knew it had enough discussion that I wanted to bring it back to the group. I didn't feel it would be very fair to just push it right on through into the next step without any feedback on that.
Okay, I have something, not surprisingly, of course I do. The May, the May, I like the idea that they may putting that in, but after I've talked about putting in shoulds a lot, there's one area on page 6 in the first dark colored bullet where you're talking about in those areas where heritage resources have been identified, an effort you have should. I would like to put in must. An effort must be made to preserve them and if possible incorporate them into the design. I don't like the if possible. I would like to take that out and just put incorporate them into the design alternatives. My concern here is that I'm all in favor of utilizing these resources. But on the other hand, I don't want them to take a building, say, and make a high rise or feel that they can really alter that resource. So I would like some limiting in language, if nothing else, and putting the must there, and then taking out the if possible. It would make me feel a whole lot better.
I agree with Jan.
Jose,
This is David
Oh,
Vanel. I
yeah.
totally agree that that it ought to be stiffened, if you will. And you know, we've had some catastrophes here in the past, and we don't want to repeat them.
Yeah, as many teeth as you can put in that dragon, put them in. You know, and I would put them in and wait for somebody to fight you to take them out, because we need this. We're a special place that's unique in the county and in the country, and we cannot lose another building like the API Marcel Breuer masterpiece. We just cannot do it.
Right.
I mean, there isn't anything else like that here, but I will never get over that. I don't think a lot of us will ever get over that. Thank
I
you.
won't. No, I won't.
Well, Jan, want to speak to your concern about building on top of. This section and throughout I refer to rehabilitation and adaptive reuse. Those principles won't accommodate such types of reuses. So that is one of the nice things about the language in here. We're speaking about rehabilitation. So that I think is well protected. I would be all the happy to say that there must be an effort to preserve them. But that's, I mean, I think you all probably knew that, but I didn't want to go that boldly with that. I'm fine with that, but obviously that's why I wanted to bring that to discussion. And obviously if there are any other discussions on the FAR item too.
Great.
I don't know, Jose, I'm trying to keep track if there's anyone who has their hand up too. I want to make sure we give everyone a chance to provide input on this as expeditiously as possible, because I know we've got a big conga line behind me.
I see 3 hands: Mark Looney, Michelle Kimmel, and John Minnie. Mark, or is that a previous hand?
That is a previous hand that I didn't know was raised.
Well, it's up. All right, it's down now. All right. Michelle, was that a new hand?
Yes, that was a new hand. On the FAR language, I'm just not sure that we haven't discussed yet an idea of bonus density. And so I think two things. I think if we're going to do bonus density or alter FARs in some way, I do think we should look at that in at one time and make sure that we know what we're doing holistically. And then secondly, it seems, or I think it might almost be better to include within the specific areas if we can identify if we can just be more clear um, which resources we really want to provide that carrot to, if you will. So that's what I would say is I instead of just having a very general and broad incentive, I'd like it to be more specific, and I would like it to be considered with other incentives so that we know exactly what might occur.
I would definitely love to know about more efforts in that. When it comes to targeting, the identification of heritage research is an ongoing rolling process in the county. And the county has a kind of a problem with the fact that it has not done a good job identifying heritage resources in many areas. We've got the ones that we can all think of off the top of our heads that we know are important in Fairfax County, but there are a lot more. Just recently, just for example, the Architecture Review Board and the History Commission are asking for grant money to help do an identification effort of African American resources in the county, which is a under-identified heritage resource. The first step is just us identifying the potential properties. Then we have to start potentially listing them as heritage resources, which takes more time. So I didn't want to tether it to a specific area because it didn't feel forward-looking enough. That was kind of the rationale for that. If that helps answer it any bit, Michelle.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I know that would definitely be the problem, right? But I am concerned that it's very broad, and I just think that we should consider it with other FAR incentives should be considered at the same time if we're doing that in the land use section, which I think is where this was previously.
Oh, this is a wholly brand new sentence.
Oh, sorry, what bonus density was
Okay.
previously. Yeah.
I think that's part of the reason why I want to bring this on to staff too, is I want to see where they might suggest this goes too. I wasn't seeking necessarily a vote on the full approval of the section, but I definitely yanked it away from the county staff to bring it to the task force first. So I am curious if they will suggest that as well in putting it in the land use section, which I wouldn't have any issue with either. I just definitely want to provide that incentive for these types of underrepresented resources that are, frequently get overlooked. So I'm happy to explore that opportunity too.
Thank you, Michelle. John Mooney, and I think then after that, Chris, I think we'll move on.
Okay.
Thank you, Jose. I'm going to take up Chris's mention of FAR and Michelle's, and I think our discussion of land use is the proper place to talk about it. But I want to identify what I have heard, what I have understood to be two concepts of additional density, earning additional density. There's the traditional one. So whether density is expressed as FAR or whether it's addressed as dwelling units per acre, it's frequently listed as a range. And one meaning of additional density, which tends to be identified with the notion of bonus density, is that you're able to go beyond the end of that range. That is the typical understanding. However, Supervisor Alcorn has articulated a possible other model, and that is it is saying that you earn additional density up through that range. In other words, if the allowed density is 13 to 20 units per acre for multifamily dwellings, you don't. Walter has at times articulated the notion that you cannot start presuming you have 20 units per acre. You have by other considerations, by other benefits you give to the community, you have to earn your way from 13 up to 20, or from 1 FAR to 2.5 FAR, whatever the range is. So I just wanted to point out that there have been There's the traditional understanding of additional density, earning additional density, and there's the idea that Walter has floated out. So I think we need to keep that in mind too when we talk about this.
Thanks, John.
All right, thanks, Chris. I think we can, David Vanel, I think we can go to housing.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank the county staff for being so helpful with providing me with documentation of what I was trying to research, and also answering a number of my, maybe an unending number of my questions. Last couple days ago, I sent out two documents. One was a revised version of the sort of the long version of this, 5 or 6 pages worth of stuff. And I also attached a summary outline and a key issues for discussion. So if I could, what I'd like to do is just kind of go over the key issues and talk about some of the changes that I made, some of the things that I'd like to get some feedback on. I guess since in the last 2 weeks that the documents have been out there saying, please send me your feedback and I'll incorporate it into the document. I haven't heard a word from anybody. So I would like to assume that you all love this thing and you don't want to have anything to say about it. It's just good as it is. But with this group, I'm sure that's not the case. What I tried to focus on in this was, well, there we go. Okay. New production, and decided I wasn't going to try to put in absolute numbers into this document. I'm not sure that it belongs either in this document or in the comprehensive plan, but the idea of doubling the current number of affordable and workforce housing units in the next 15 years is an extrapolation by me of what the county dashboard, the county-wide dashboard says applies to Reston's current population, or Reston's current numbers, and what the county is asking for basically is a bit more than doubling in the next 15 years. So I just sort of borrowed that. It's a loose figure, of course, but it's something to look at. Preservation is another important issue, and preserving housing, preserving affordable housing at the lower end of the AMIs, I think is especially important. Committed affordable housing, market affordable units, one-for-one replacement, using county land for affordable housing construction, preserving larger bedroom sizes, and something that I added from the initial one that I sent out was the idea that if there are buildings initially designated as office buildings that are vacant and presumably will be vacant for some time, perhaps the county could work with the owner, the developer, to see how much of that, what sort of residential could be put into a place like that because the building's already there. I talked a little bit about the transit-oriented district, and this is a steal from county documents, allowing 0.5 above FAR for proposals that achieve 2 or more of the following things. I added something in there about changing the WDU housing from a guarantee from 50 to 99 years. I think Tammy had raised that earlier. And then I modified the chart that I originally had sent out. And the way this kind of works out is after thinking about it and talking to some people and thinking about it some more, it seems to me that the WDU the extra special stuff for WDUs in Reston, I think really ought to be focused down toward the transit stations rather than elsewhere in the community. Possibly in the village centers if that's possible, but otherwise the current countywide numbers on the left-hand side of the page are what I would recommend for along with the bonus density up to 20%, is what I would recommend for the rest of Reston outside the transit-oriented districts. And then a couple of not new things, but things that I think bear looking at. I know the county has public-private partnerships going on, but I'm not sure that they have such partnerships specifically dedicated to preservation of existing affordable housing units. So I would like to have something inserted in about that, and also community land trusts, which, as I explain in the document, in both documents, it basically takes the cost of the land out of the equation, so that the cost of rent or the cost of purchase stays lower. Nobody, the nonprofit owns the land, and the cost is for people trying to move in either to rent or buy is much reduced. So that's kind of where I am, and again, I welcome anybody's thoughts about this. So over to you.
Thank you, David. And I just did want to note that Tom Fleetwood with the Department of Housing and Community Development is on the call, as well as Abdi, Graham, Judith, that have come to previous task force meetings as well. So I do see some hands, David. I see John Mooney and Lynn Molston, and then I also see Jan Bradshaw. John, did you want to? Oh, the hand went down. Lynn.
Oh, David, thank you so much for taking on this chapter. I know that I keep harping on this, and I'm going to continue to harp on it, that the lumping of ADUs and WDUs into one big category ends up providing the community with WDUs, and I think that it is to the detriment of providing an inventory of ADUs, and we really do need to, focus on that inventory of ADUs. I think that we've got a wonderful inventory of WDUs, but I just think that we need to put some language into this chapter that really incents folks to provide an inventory of affordable dwelling units. Thank you.
Lynn, I agree with you. There's in no way did I intend for this to come off as a lumping them together. It's two completely different issues. Well, not completely different issues, but it's two different issues, and we have to have answers for both.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Jan.
Thank you. When you were describing the chart, you were saying that on the left is a Reston policy, but that's not what you have written down here.
No, what I said for the column on the left is
Right.
the current countywide policy.
Right, that's what I thought.
And yeah, the current countywide policy, which I am suggesting should probably be the Reston policy for other than the transit-oriented district.
I agree with that. Actually.
Okay.
I would like that too.
And the other one is the one on the right is a little bit more aggressive. It's larger WDU commitment, but actually not quite as large a bonus density commitment. And I got that from data. So it's certainly fungible, but no, the one on the left is what I would recommend be adopted for Reston's other than the transit-oriented district.
Very good, because I think the whole goal is to try and keep the population down ultimately to a more manageable level than 157,000 people. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I think that that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. And I see two new hands, Gary Maupin and then Mark Looney.
Could you let Mark go first and then me?
Yeah, Mark, did you want to go first?
Sure, I'm happy to go first. I mean, a couple of comments about this. One, I don't know that the 3, 3, and 6 on the 12% WDU commitment is necessarily where we ought to end up. But I appreciate David's efforts to try to come close to what is in the Tyson's recommendations. And to that point, one of the things that's in the Tyson's recommendations is an option for providing a fewer number of units at a lower AMI level, simply because I think not all deals are created equal from a land value pricing standpoint. And so providing an option to do fewer units at a lower AMI number or more units at higher AMI numbers, you might find some takers for each program. And so I would encourage us to look at that as we talk about how to implement this going forward. And then I think that long term, part of the way to solve this problem in terms of the availability of reduced or subsidized units, let's say, or lower income focused units, is to increase the overall supply of housing. And I think that there are some creative things that we can do in the land use context and the recommendations for that that would incent particularly the nonprofit developers that David was talking about in coming in and providing a greater congregation of units than 10 or 12% in a single building, but to potentially do entire developments that are focused on workforce housing income levels by creating or being creative in how we allocate land use policy and how we permit them through the process. And so I'd encourage us to think about those things as well as we get into this, because it's one of the points that I've tried to make is that if the objective is to rely on the development community to provide 100% of the workforce housing going forward, we're going to fall way short of, or the for-profit development community in providing that, we're going to fall way short of the overall objective. We've got to come up with some other options to put on the table as well.
Thanks, Mark.
That's my soapbox.
That's very good. When I originally had the WDU policy for Reston, I think I had it at 1, 1, and 1, or 3, 4, 4, and 4, 4%, 4%, and 4%. And kind of after doing some back of the envelope calculations, I thought perhaps 3, 3, and 6, or 1, 1, and 2 would be a better mix. But I want to make sure that how this is written into the comprehensive plan provides for the county and the developers to engage in, what you mentioned was maybe some other option. Maybe one of the options would be to add a Tyson's like thing to this chart and let the county and the developer, the for-profit developer, have another avenue.
Thank you, Mark.
He-
So, go. Do you have a thought?
Well, all I was going to say is I agree, David, and I think this is where the input from the folks who have to actually implement this is going to be important as we try to finalize this.
So Gary, and then Michelle, and then we'll move on.
So I guess my comment is I kind of get lost in the ratios and numbers here, and I've had people talk about this in relation to Fairfax County, and the difference to our past policy. I wonder if any other comments are related to your view of. I mean, you've done a great job. You really have, David. But I wonder about the levels that you set. Does anybody else have comments? Because I'm not a super expert on those. And then, some of your new approaches, and I've suddenly forgot what this is called, but you're working with others. What is it called here?
Community Land Trust?
Yes, Community Land Trust. If you could discuss that a little more as well. And, I'm not hearing a lot of comments on where people think this should be, as opposed to you've got no comments, but I think other people have some opinions, and Mark just kind of weighed in here. And I guess I'd like to hear a little more on that, because I do kind of get confused in the numbers as we go through this. And also, how does Reston stand up to the rest of Fairfax County? So I'll just.
How does it stand up in Fairfax County in terms of what?
In terms of affordable housing? How do we look in comparison to the other areas across the county? And, what is our approach here in terms of, where we should be and others' opinions, because I'm not an expert. And then, issues that you brought up related to the land trust.
Okay, well, let me start with the land trust. It's something that I didn't know about until I started researching this, and frankly, it was John Mooney who keyed me on to some documentation on that, outside documentation, outside of actually outside the United States too. But it kind of explains to you in a nutshell in the last page, the sub paragraph B. You take a public trust, to create a public trust to purchase land that takes the ownership of the land away from the ownership of the dwelling units. And then price increases for the land don't over time don't affect the pricing of the real estate itself, the actual building, the apartment, the whatever. And as it says here, long-term affordability of ADUs and WDUs lowers the overall cost over time of these projects to buyers, renters, and the county taxpayers, and allows expansion in the number of county residents in need of these programs. Perhaps John could weigh in with his experience, I guess, in Arlington a few years ago. But that's the fundamental reason for creation of these land trusts, community land trusts. And there's lots of land trusts. If you Google land trusts in Virginia, they're all over the place, but they're almost all conservation oriented, and not that I could find any housing oriented land trusts. But so the other question was, I should have written it down
Fairfax, how do we stack up in Reston?
Oh, right. Okay. Reston's percentage of affordable and Reston's percentage of having affordable and dwelling unit, workforce dwelling units is, I think, the second or third highest in the county at about 16%. So 16% of those are found here, and or at least in Hunter Mill district. And so in trying to determine where we want to be in 15 years, again, what it was a real back of the envelope calculation, maybe not even an envelope or a pen, but if Fairfax County wants to create X thousands of new dwelling units in the next 15 years, Reston probably ought to have 16% of that. And again, that's a kind of a loosey-goosey calculation, but we have done, and I'm sure we'll continue to do our part in terms of what we in Reston and we in Hunter Mill need to do for those two problems.
But our affordable housing in Reston, vice other areas of the county, is second or third, or is it? I guess the numbers of those housing. Yes, we're second or third highest district in terms of having that type of housing in our area. Okay. And then back to the,
I think Providence and maybe Walter or Jose can correct me on that, but I think Providence and one other are above us, and I think they're tied at like 17 or 18%, but I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Recall.
I'm not sure what those numbers are, but the point is we're all short. We're all quite, and we're creating a lot of jobs in the Reston area that need people of all income levels.
And then the other question is, because of the numbers here that I'm not as familiar with, I thought others had discussed this over time, and you've come up with a proposal, and I just wondered if anybody else who's sharper than I am on this wants to weigh in on that.
I've got some points to add, John Carter.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, in terms of the numbers, and I take some blame for this, we have more units approved in Reston in the last 3 years than have been built in all of Fairfax County. So we have a lot coming forward. Not that it's enough, but we have quite a lot. Looking at the chart, I wonder, you see on the countywide, see that's not a requirement, those numbers, that's a starting point. So I wonder if we should have a paragraph below the one in Reston that kind of matches the one in the county. So you see the 224 is a starting point for the county, but you can go higher than that, but you can't give a bonus more than 20%. So I wonder if something in Reston would be useful along those lines. The next thing that I would offer is I think it's all way too low. So I would prefer the 4, 4, and 4, but that's up to you. I think the density bonus is too high. I think 16% is plenty. But more importantly than that, we do have an existing policy, and there's a nice chart in the existing comp plan that I wonder we may have thrown out a little too soon. And the gist of that is that there's kind of a floor, and then if you're if you're upping your density, you are supposed to up the affordable housing. It's a line chart. And so I would think it would be better to have one policy for all of Reston. It's the same. It just makes it much easier. and then have that sliding scale. So if you go up in density, which would be the transit station areas, then you go up in WDUs. I would think that would be a better approach. I don't know why we would go back to the county approach. It just is, it just makes us look bad, frankly. And compared to all the other jurisdictions in the Washington region, we are teeny tiny compared to the other jurisdictions. So I wonder about that. So those are my points on the inclusionary zoning policy. I wonder if it wouldn't be worth mentioning two other areas that we have affordable housing in. One is the village centers, where we have excluded the residential areas on the surrounding areas surrounding the village centers. And that's an affordable housing approach where the new housing is within the commercial areas. And we specifically want to preserve the housing outside. And there's a lot of affordable housing in there. So I wonder if it wouldn't be worth saying that. And then my third one is the multifamily area. We have not upped the density in almost all those multifamily areas. That is the reason we've done that, is to preserve the affordable housing in that. And then my three items are inclusionary zoning, preservation of existing in the village, surrounding the village centers, and in the multifamily areas. And in the third one, we have our Northtown Center area where you have county-owned land. And so that's the possibility for the county actually building affordable housing, which is the way they do it in the county. The county has inclusionary zoning, and then they have the ones that they build. I just wonder if that wouldn't be worthwhile. And sorry to be so critical of these charts, but I do think not going less than we did in the past under the current comp plan is bringing that table back in, or that chart back in, that makes you up your affordable housing as the density goes up. And we have several projects approved with that. I don't know that a lot of people have taken great advantage of that, but we don't want to be undercutting what's already been approved. So I hope you got all of that.
John, thanks very much for that. Yeah, I did note all of it. A couple of comments. The issue with WDU commitment, again, WDU commitment, but WDU commitment outside the transit-oriented district, I think, to me, actually, I think makes sense. And we could play with the numbers. We could play a little bit with the numbers to see what we can, maybe raise it a little bit on the total commitment, maybe to 10%. But I think that the important part of this is that we encourage the density in the transit-oriented district with the WDU commitment, which is available in the higher rise buildings that are going to be built there, more intense density. But I take your points, and I think the chart that you refer to, where it goes from 1 FAR to 4 FAR and goes from up to 18 or even 20% beyond FAR. That is already in the current comprehensive plan for Reston, well, for the whole county, I guess. And I would not propose. Is that just Reston? Yes. I would not propose to take that out. I think that belongs in there. I'm not. This is not my this is not my rewrite of the comp plan. This is my presentation of ideas that can be included into the comp plan, and that chart that you refer to absolutely needs to stay in.
Yeah.
David, this is
maybe you missed it. You see that the last three lines on the county side of this chart with increased bonus up to 20%. I would add that to the Reston side. That's what I was talking about.
David, this is Mark.
Okay.
Let me jump in here, because I want to be clear about something. The sliding scale that is in the current comprehensive plan was developed when the income levels for those who rent or purchase these units were set at 80, 100, and 120 of AMI.
Right, that's
It
right.
was reflective of the AMI levels in effect at the time that that plan was adopted. The countywide policies have subsequently changed to say that ADU or WDUs are to be provided to people making between 60 and 80% of AMI, not 80% and 120 of AMI. If you leave that sliding scale in while concurrently reducing the AMI levels from 80 to 120 to 60 to 80, that is a completely different regime. And I fear will run afoul of that pesky little thing called the Constitution of the Commonwealth that says you can't take private property for public benefit without compensation. And so I think you're in a position where if you want to leave the sliding scale in, you got to leave the AMI levels at something approaching 80, 100, and 120, as opposed to 60, 70, and 80. Because that was the big change at the countywide level, was to reduce the AMIs to get a greater subsidy of the units, but require fewer units at the same time in order to solve the constitutional question of inclusionary zoning. I'm not saying that that the breakdown you have here is the end all be all of what that needs to be, but a sliding scale that requires 20% of the units as WDUs between 60 and 80% of AMI, it is a whole different kettle of fish than 20% of the units at 80 to 120 of AMI.
Well, then maybe now, Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding was that in addition to what you just said, that one of the reasons that 100 and 120% of AMI were dropped, one of the reasons was that nobody was making application for that.
Correct.
That people at that
Correct.
income level, they were simply going to the market.
It was reflective of market rates, which is why the income levels got dropped.
So perhaps that sliding scale chart needs to be revamped. I don't know enough about it to say for sure, but if it's inconsistent, if that sliding scale is inconsistent with, you know, what we're proposing here, what I'm proposing here, maybe it needs to be revamped.
So, I mean, fine. I think the question becomes then what's the upper limit, right? And so I think to John's point, a lot of what ended up happening in the last 5 years, give or take, was that individual projects negotiated down from the 80 to 120 AMI to something less than that.
Yes.
And it was kind of a catch as catch can conversation about how you did it and what you did it and how it factored into other things. If you're gonna reduce the AMI levels, then the beginning numbers and the ending numbers on the chart need to change as well, right? So instead of it starting at 12 and going to 18 or 20, which is what the current chart shows, maybe it starts at 8 and goes to 12, or it starts at 6 and it goes to 14, or whatever the number is that goes along with it. I just don't think it's not the same chart that's in there today, is my point.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that.
This is all.
What I'm concerned about is what I want to make sure is that we as a community can meet the needs that are out there for affordable dwelling units and workforce dwelling units.
Right.
And as long as we can do that, then and as long as, for example, these two columns address that need, then maybe that's what we ought to go with.
It's at the end of the day, it's a mathematical equation, and it's about do you prefer a greater subsidy, meaning you get fewer units at a greater subsidy, or do you prefer more units at a lesser subsidy? And that's really just the conversation that has to occur, right? Your ADUs are at 50 to 70% of AMI. Right now, the WDUs are between 60 and 80% of AMI. That was why I was suggesting earlier an option for providing, instead of 12%, maybe it's 9%, but they're all at 60, right? So you're meeting, you're creating a public policy that says we value subsidies over total number of units, right? Fewer units, but greater subsidies. And that's your public policy conversation.
That's why the three lines under the county policy belong over on the Reston side. So this is a negotiated thing. There is no fixed standard. So that's it's not a preferable way to do it. And in my view, there are ups and downs with that, but I think that it makes it work a little bit better this is not the standard. This might be a starting point, and then you have some flexibility to do what Mark is saying, either more affordable housing at higher tiers, or so I would think that would be important. You know, there's no awards for this. We are way behind. We are way behind Alexandria, way behind Arlington. We are way under what they do. And if you go outside of our region, we're super behind Montgomery County and super behind the district. So there's no awards for doing this. I just think the flexibility that Fairfax has used traditionally, as much as I get irritated about that having to negotiate it on the planning commission, it seems to be fit the way we do things. One thing I forgot to add is the offsite. I would resist the offsite notion. These things have to be done on site. I think there's a lawyer in Montgomery County I used to work with, and his comment was the last person last client he had that took advantage of offsite spent 10 years in jail. So I think the offsite has proved to be unsuccessessful. Seems like a good idea, but it avoids this idea of concentrating somewhere else, and it's avoiding just this whole additional negotiating that goes on with doing offsite. So I would recommend taking that out. And again, the inclusive zoning, the village centers, the multifamily, and the Northtown Center or any other county-owned land would be a sort of a three-pronged approach to affordable housing.
Okay. Thank you, John.
That is congruent with the equity section as well.
Yes, it would be. Yeah.
Well, I'll play with this last page and see what I can come up with on the issue of offsite. I think I actually tried to deal with, if it has to be offsite, then it must be in a place that offers all of the benefits of the current location, transportation benefits and recreational benefits and things like that. Anyway.
Just think the rest of the way is to mix it on site and not to have conglomerations of affordable housing in this area or that area. So that's the point. Anyway, enough of me.
Thank you, John and Lynn. I just wanted to point out that we do have some additional hands, and then we do need to move on. So Michelle, and then I noticed that Tammy and Jan had a new hand, but I think Gary also has a new hand. So Michelle.
John actually just covered what I wanted to bring up.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of the offsite, and then also I think it is the Reston way that the units are mixed throughout Reston, and that we don't have a big congregation. You know, I do want to bring up one thing though. I'm just confused on one point that's mentioned sometimes with affordable housing, that if we just keep adding more housing, one day eventually we'll get affordable housing. And I'm just very confused. When will that day come? I mean, you know, in the Washington Business Journal, I think it was just this week, a nonprofit affordable housing developer said that he's basically been priced out of Reston since before the Silver Line. and that the areas of great concern are right now the areas throughout the county that typically were in his range. So we're not any closer. And I just find that just adding more does not seem to be a real solution.
Tammy, did you have a comment? And then Jan, and then
Yeah,
Gary.
I'll try to be really quick. I've told the thing about Montgomery County and their 12.5% at 65 AMI, take it or leave it, no negotiations, same developers here. I'm a little concerned about hearing that we're going to run into a constitutional problem. Last I checked, Arlington and Alexandria were in Virginia too. And we do not aggregate poor people in one spot. That is absolutely proven to be a deadly thing to do. So the idea about putting a whole giant building of ADUs, meaning ADUs, not WDUs, is a problem. You could possibly mix WDUs, ADUs, and market rate and be okay. But that's my comment. Thank you.
Jan, and then Gary.
Yeah, I've got one more comment, and that is that I want you to keep in mind that Reston is not Tyson's. It's not high density. We are back to nature. We are not known for high density like Tyson's. And I think it's a mistake to make us into that. That's all I have.
Thank you, Jan. Gary, you have the last word.
I'll just agree with what Michelle just said. I think what she just said was very important. Also, on community land trusts, I'm just wondering if that is, viable. I know John brought it up. It's a great thing to bring up, but is it going to, run into, economic or legal issues? So I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that, Mark or anyone else, or John.
Gary, what I suggest, I think that is probably a longer conversation.
Right.
Tom Fleetwood actually has been here the whole time. What I'd ask is maybe either Tom, if you could maybe maybe we could have a separate call later on with Tom and some other folks interested from the task force, maybe several of you, and then kind of work through this because there are great discussion, but I think it's probably going to take a little bit longer.
Yeah, yes, sir. Sorry, didn't mean to prolong it. Sorry.
No, that's okay. But thank you, Gary.
I think that was all the hands. So thank you, David, and everyone else that commented.
You're welcome.
And Jose, before we move on, thank you, Tom and housing staff that were here. I think that could be David Vanel. Thank you so much for pulling all this together. You really hit the mark by putting a proposal out there that people could both throw darts at and express ideas on where to go. So that was really good. And perhaps David, we can coordinate with you offline on when perhaps there could be a special meeting to sort of have some additional discussion for interested parties here.
Sounds good.
Thank you. And so Jose, I know it's 8:39, and I know our tradition is to try to wrap up by 9. We've failed in that tradition, but not too badly. And but it's usually meant we haven't gotten all the way through. We spent last meeting and pushed Lynn off and didn't get to you at all, Lynn. John Mooney, I'm wondering if would you be particularly crestfallen if we did not do the transportation main points this evening and we just jumped right into land use for a half hour or so?
I was feigning tears. No, I'm fine.
Okay. So that's okay. Okay. All right. Then, Lynn, thank you, John, very much. Lynn, would you be ready then to, you want to
Yes,
go through your presentation?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
And let's shoot for a half hour, maybe a little longer, maybe a
Well,
little shorter, but
if it's okay, before I get to the actual presentation, I just want to share some highlights with the task force on what we've been working on. So it's going to be kind of a three-part section. I just want to bring up the land use map and some of the changes that we have identified and will be bringing to staff. And then I also want to just share the table of contents, and then I'll go through the presentation that highlights some of the changes to the land use section, to the chapter. So what you are seeing on your screen right now is the land use map. This is the big land use map that was at the beginning of the current land use chapter and the current plan. We've identified some areas, and for the most part, the map is unchanged. There are just these areas. Number ones here are the Fairway Apartments. For some reason, the legend coloring was incorrect, so we are going to be asking staff to change that to low-density multifamily, which is what it is. This area here, number 2, if you can see my cursor, that is Edgewater Park. Right here where it says C plan text, this is the old Reston Town Center North. But Edgewater Park needs to be included in the Reston Center North, since that is part of the open space. And then finally, if we go up here, there were some really odd legend colors that we couldn't really put our finger on. And these are labeled as number 3. And it looks like these may pertain to countywide land use categories. We don't know. So these are the 3 areas that we're going to be asking for staff's assistance with on these maps. We're also going to be revising this base map just to make sure that the latest parcel information is reflected. So that's Reston Parkway and other roads. We need to revise the boundaries for Reston Town Center North and provide that Edgewater Park, as I previously mentioned. And that's, we'll request a justification from planning staff concerning the correct land use for Wheelie Avenue, New Bedford Lane area, and the Fields View, Stonecrest area. So that's it for the map, just to bring everybody up to date. Now, next, you all have all seen the current table of contents. So we really created a new land use chapter that includes an introduction and recommendations for each of these geographic areas of Reston. So you'll see for the transit station areas, we have an introduction and then area-wide recommendations. And this theme carries through for the village centers, for the convenience centers, for other commercial areas, Reston neighborhoods, and neighborhoods outside the Reston PRC area. We've added tables for residential and non-residential land use calculations, which you will see when I get into the presentation. We have eliminated the potential for receiving additional density of 0.5 FAR for all parcels in the TOD areas if a consolidation occurs. We've added a resource protection area for the 3 ponds adjacent to the floodplain in the Sunset Hills area of the town center transit station area. We have reaffirmed the density for all the multifamily areas located outside of the TSA. as 13 to 20. We've limited the potential for housing to only 1 residential areas of the Hunters Woods, South Lakes, and North Point Village Centers, and designated those areas for up to 20 dwelling units per acre. We have relocated the planning history section, and you'll have seen that in the context of the body. Relocated the planning history section to the introduction of the bigger plan. And then added an option for housing in the industrial area, in the Wheelie East Transit Station area and south of the Dulles Toll Road. And that's adjacent to the South Lakes Drive extension.
Lynn, can I interrupt you? This is Tammy. Sure. Your map is strobing sort of, and there's nothing else on the screen.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry. I thought, I guess I need to stop sharing and then reshare.
Thank you. I didn't think that's how you wanted to present it, but it was sort of interesting.
No, you
like
should be
modern
seeing
art
the contents. Thank you. Thank you, Tammy. I appreciate that. That's why it was strobing, because I'm scrolling and saying, here we have the transit station areas with the introduction and the area-wide recommendations. Village centers, same theme carries throughout. Thank you, Tammy. The other thing that we've done is we've retained the recommendations for the Lake Ann Village Center, except the option for additional density was deleted for consolidation, and then retained the recommendations for the areas outside of Reston. So now I would like to go into my presentation, if you bear with me. And this is where I'll be able to share some of the calculations, I guess I need to stop sharing again. Right, Jose? Stop
said John Carter.
Stop and share.
I wonder if it wouldn't be worth going back to the table of contents and showing people how it's actually organized, since people might have missed that.
Okay.
Since it wasn't up there to begin with.
Okay, let's see. Here's the word. Okay. Yeah, so as I was mentioning, so we have the introduction to land use and design, and then we start getting into the areas. So we've got the transit station areas. We're showing the introduction. This planning history is recommended that we move this, and we are going to recommend that this get moved to the introduction of the whole plan itself. But then we have the area-wide recommendations for the transit station areas, and we cover Wheelie, Reston Town Center, Herndon, and the design and placemaking as recommendations for the Reston transit station areas. Then we get into village centers, and again, we have the introduction. We have the recommendations for each village center. We highlight and go into specifics on Hunters Woods, North Point, South Lakes. We point in this chapter that Tall Oaks is no longer a village center, but it remains in this subsection. And of course, Lake Ann Village Center. And as I mentioned previously, the only thing that we've changed in the Lake Ann Village Center was the deletion of the additional density for consolidation. And then convenience centers, same theme, introduction and then recommendations, and touched on each of the identified convenience centers. Okay. So now I'd like to, if I may, get into, do you have anything else that you wanted to add, John, about the organization?
Well, there's that last point, the neighborhoods outside of Reston, we're struggling with that, I think.
Yeah.
There's some areas outside of Reston that are included in the Reston comp plan, and the staff wanted to keep that in.
Why?
They should talk to us again about that.
Yeah.
And there are some that are there that have no identifiers at all. And I was able to ferret out a couple on the list, but there are two that we have no clue what we're describing. There's no identifying anything. So we need help from the staff on what those were.
Right. And we've got notations within the chapter that call out where we need staff's assistance. So with that, I've got 10 minutes. I'm going to zoom through the presentation. Reshare. Okay. Okay. So this is the, I'm just going to give you all a very quick overview of the land use chapter highlights. So as we mentioned, this is not the updated map to show the new fairways or address the issues that we had identified, but this pretty much mirrors the outline that you all saw in the table of contents. This is how we are organized for this chapter. Some of the things that we've, these will be included, these are the Reston land use categories. So we've identified what the land uses are, what the density is, and then we've offered descriptions of what those are. We think that that will be quite helpful for folks. The Reston land use calculations. This is also included in the latest iteration of the chapter, which I apologize, we are still working on getting this next draft in shape that we can get it out to the full task force. But the land use calculations are broken into residential areas and non-residential areas. And we've done our best to show what the existing and approved dwelling units for residential in village centers, convenience centers, where the residential exists, and then also within non-residential, what that existing and approved square footage is. And then also look at the maximum remaining dwelling units for residential and square feet for non-residential, and then the same with the maximum potential. And then we show calculations on what the dwelling units would be. We are looking at a calculation of 105,653 people in Reston. Whoops, sorry about that. Okay, and then into the non-residential calculations, we've been able to calculate out how many jobs and then how many jobs per household. So once we get this next iteration of the chapter out to the task force, we will be looking forward to comments and recommendations on that. So in the transit station areas, we have identified to help folks visually understand what things are located on this map. We can see Reston Town Center North is here. This is the approved spectrum area, the YMCA. You can basically see Commerce One, Association Drive, Woodland Park, all the way to the west there. So land use and design for the transit station areas, as I mentioned, that is broken into the introduction, and then we have the area-wide recommendations for the TSAs. So we just specifically go into detail on the Wheelie Station area, the Reston Town Center area, Herndon, and then touch on design and placemaking. And these maps are very important. This upper map really shows the FAR. We envision that these maps will be included in the chapter. Then we get into the town center station area, and this is important just because there's so much there. And this portion of the chapter, I think, was probably it was the most unwieldy, and it was the way that it was composed was very confusing. So I want to thank John Carter and Tammy and everybody that was serving in this working group in helping to really bring some kind of organization to this, because it was really very difficult to understand. But within the town center station area, we have the TOD and the non-TOD districts with north and south sub-districts within TOD, along with the town center urban core TOD district that is existing today. And then also for non-TOD, we just have the north sub-district. I think that we've added something to this, or maybe not. Yeah, I think we're good. One that I wanted to bring your attention to is this second bullet under the non-TOD north sub-district, this west of Fountain Drive. So if we look at this next slide, we know that this is what the DRB has recently reviewed. And I believe that they did approve this, this new plan, this new design. What we are doing, somebody at our last meeting said, let's name Reston Town Center North something different. So we came up with Reston Civic Center. Now we're still identifying Innova as having blocks 2, 4, and 6. But the Civic Center, these bullet points show what the Civic Center is inclusive of. So we're specifically calling out the regional library, the government center, the 10-acre required open space, the rec center, 90,000 square feet, full-size athletic field, the expanded worker shelter with 30-unit transitional housing, the elementary school, expanded human services office building, and 130 units, including existing townhouses and future affordable housing. And I think that is where I just added that little block 9 to this, because the original area has 8. But as I mentioned, Innova has blocks 2, 4, and 6. That's where we see the housing going. And the Innova and Civic Center, this will be activating retail. And what that means is that there will be activities going on day and night that will attract visitors and neighbors and the community to this area. Then we go into village centers. So as I mentioned, the chapter does include the 5 village centers, but in terms of those village centers that are still functioning today, we have 4. So we've, again, provided the introduction for village centers, the guidelines, and then recommendations for each. As I mentioned at the onset, we are sticking with the existing plan at Lake Anne. Then to conclude, we have the convenience centers and other commercial areas in the comp plan. So there's an introduction for each. And in the convenience centers, we have the black circles. These are the 4 convenience centers. And then the other commercial areas, we have in red, the Barron Cameron and Bowman Green. And I think that's it. Zoom. And it's 1 minute to go.
All right, Lynn, way to go. That's awesome. Thank you very much for pulling that all together. I know you and John and Tammy, a whole bunch of folks, I think, pitched in for that.
Yes.
Questions here as we come up on 9 o'clock. I see no hands, so
I see Mark Malcolm has a hand.
So I'm just going to move approval and then move on. No, I'm just kidding.
I did get Mark Malcolm's. Mark, you had submitted some comments today, so we'll get those reviewed and.
Understand. You might want to ask with the county staff, Mark Malcolm. I apologize for going over Jan, but with that, use the Herndon Station area, the FAR versus the a units complex, units calculation to see if they make sense. The issue is the square footage for residential. It's the same as the office when you plan it out. It's not physically possible with that far. So what would be reasonable to make it into how much density and translate it into height? Because what affects that particular area is there's a residential area that's known as Polo Fields that's within that quarter-mile zone in which you normally look at height. So it impacts. There are a couple of other things that are outside of land use that are on the transportation side. There's a transportation project to redesign Sunrise Valley for those wonderful off-road bike lanes. So the biggest concern, I have to reiterate, that keeps coming up for everything that involves Polo Fields on two of its sides is eminent domain issues keep coming up with this development of land use. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And Mark, did anyone from DPW connect with you yet? Not yet.
Negative, sir, and I haven't really done my job to reach out and make that happen as well.
All right. Well, let's make sure we got all of August, but let's definitely make that happen. Thank you, Mark.
Roger, sir.
Thanks for your comments, Mark. Thanks.
I wanted to let you know that there is a question from Dave Sittler that he sent just to me privately, and he's asking where does Reston Town Center North fit into the table of contents? So if I could just reshare the table of contents, I can take care of answering his question. Would that be all right?
Of course.
So Reston Town Center North fits into the Reston Town Center Transit Station area. And there is a sub-district within the chapter that we are still working on, still in a draft form. But I can, let's see, this will let me go. So here's north, we have mixed use with office. And then there's also mixed use with, oh, this is the old one, sorry. But it's under that.
It's west of Fountain Drive sub-district.
Yes.
It's where it is in the existing comprehensive plan. Dave?
I'm just replying separately so that he'll know that that's.
He said thanks in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Other questions, comments at this point?
Good job, Lynn.
Oh, thank you, Jan.
Great job.
For your attention.
Yeah, and Len, I think the one thing I just want to make sure, I know you're still updating the slide with the numbers on them.
Right.
So yeah, I do want to make sure that number is pretty, it's consistent with the guidance in the site specific parts of the plan, or the area specific parts of the plan, if that makes sense.
Are you talking about the calculations?
Yeah, exactly. And I think they're close, but I want to make sure they match up, because we don't want to inadvertently create a land use rush where everybody comes in and tries to zone all of a sudden because they think, there's some inconsistency.
So Walter, to that point, one of the things that I think I asked about last week that I haven't truthfully had a chance to look at the draft yet to figure out is there were some land area or land base specific recommendations in the current comprehensive plan for areas like Isaac Newton Square and a few others that had, beyond the color on the map, that equated to whether you're transit station mixed use or residential mixed use. There were some specific language applicable to individual land bays. Is that language being carried forward? Is it being removed? How do you what are we doing with it, and why are we doing it? I guess is my
We're
question.
trying to update the language based on what the current conditions are today.
So
It's
just as an
it's carried forward, Mark, as to the best of our ability. Now, that doesn't mean you don't want to read it.
yeah,
The intention is carried forward. Now, there's a couple exceptions to that where we went beyond where they're going before. This is to the point where we added housing to some of the industrial areas.
right. Because I think the color maps seem to be the same, but in addition to the color maps, there were some parcel specific or land-based specific guidance that went above and beyond the colors. And that's the question that I'm trying to figure out, is whether that's being carried forward or not.
The
In addition
intention
to
is to
the other
carry
changes.
it forward. And Isaac
Okay.
Newton Square is a good example of that.
Okay.
But
And
Mark, you'll see and we struggled with this, there were target numbers for each of the transit station areas. And in at least one area, the town center, we're over the targets. And at the time, I guess Fred Selden said, well, that's okay because we've got this overall number that exceeds that. So we've taken the target numbers out altogether. And I think that's better, but I think it would be worth, particularly for the clients that you have, is to just check those and to see if that works. I think it does, but since we have new numbers, and those new numbers are intention of just reflecting the land use proposals, it was a little bit tighter than before. Hopefully it's all right. And hopefully it's not just all right, it's much better and clearer.
So one of the other questions or concerns that I had raised that there are certain locations where I was worried about the 75-25 mix on sites that were, call it, on the periphery of the TSAs. Is that, and I think, John, you had suggested that rather than change that 75-25 globally, that we could figure out locations where there ought to be some flexibility given to that. For example, if you remember the golf course plaza project that squeezed in between the golf course and the WNOD trail, that one struggled to meet the 75-25. Have you all proposed specific areas where there would be flexibility on that ratio, or is that not addressed in what you have here?
Didn't do that yet.
Let me just jump in real quick. I know something else I want to make sure that was talked about earlier, make sure gets included. One is, I know St. John's Woods is sort of part of North Point in that village center, but I know there was discussion to make sure that the plan called for not the amount of density that it currently allows for, but more along the lines of what's there now, perhaps with a little bit more. And I think John Mooney, I believe, was focused on that. The other thing that I definitely want to make sure we capture is, I know the planning principles are in a different part, but there's been a lot of discussion about formatting those planning principles in a way that developers earn their density. So we want to make sure that connects somehow to this land use as well, particularly when we're making, and I think, valid assumptions that not every developer is going to make it to that top density level called for, at least allowed for in the comprehensive plan. So this is great, Lynn. Thank you.
Thank you. I did have one more question that came in to me, and it was, does the calculation of density include ADU, WDU? For example, could the listed total of approximately 105,000 people actually be greater? And I think the answer to that is yes, it could be greater.
Yes.
I see some hand. Tammy, it looks like, do you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. And I just want to give a brief comment to the whole task force. What our charge was, or our hope was, is to create a number that is actually sustainable and somewhat workable. We know we're not going to have the connections for bridges and overpasses and divided grade, separated grade, and whatever has been recommended as needed. We know we're not getting that. So we're attempting, rather than to have the Wild West and just have everything approved, to put some brakes on this so that we can actually have a Reston community that is environmentally sustainable through this very critical time frame when our climate is going berserk and we're having more and more storms and we can't afford them and people can't afford housing. So we're trying to make that happen. We are paid close attention to the planning principles where we are a diverse, welcoming community. However, having said that, when the glass is full, the glass is full, and you can't keep packing people in it, or no one can live a sustainable life. So that I just wanted to put that out there. That's my personal philosophy and why I work so hard on trying to keep Reston the Reston that we know it can be, diverse, welcoming, etc. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tammy. Any other hands? Let's see, Gary, I see your hands up, but that might be a previous hand.
No, I think I just did raise it. I think this flows
Okay,
back. This does flow back into, I think, your conversation at the start of this task force, Supervisor Alcorn, about looking at the population and setting some standards. So this flowed from that. I think we wanted to do that early in the task force. We weren't able to get those numbers. A lot of work was done by John, Larry Butler, county staff supplying information and so forth to get to the point of doing this kind of thing and following along with what Jan Bradshaw has mentioned many times here, of coming to something that looks like Reston, following along with Tammy's comments, and sets us at the right stage for what Reston should really be.
Thank you very much, Gary. And I see John Mooney has his hand up. I don't see anyone else. So I believe, John, you might get the last word.
Okay, thank you, Walter. You identified me as kind of contact for St. John's Woods and other ones. I certainly have expressed concerns about that throughout this process, but ever since I've been on the RA board, the lead within the community on that, whether through CPR or for Reclaim Reston, has been my colleague and neighbor Bruce Ramos. So he's kind of been the visible leader on much of that stuff. I just wanted to acknowledge that.
All right, John, thank you. Okay, well, very good. I do want to give opportunity there. We've actually had, I guess, an extra week where people could look at this, but Lynn, I believe you and John and others are still working on some of the details. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Okay.
we want to make sure that this is really a solid chapter and that we want to make sure there are no mistakes and give folks an opportunity to react to something that is accurate.
All right. Thank you very much, Lynn. Any final comments or questions on the land use section? Okay. All right, then it's 9:14. I think we've hit our new tradition of going to about 9:15. So thanks everybody for your patience with that. And John Mooney, thank you again for skipping the transportation portion tonight.
Thank you, John, for that courtesy. I appreciate it.
So we will be taking a break through August. Obviously, feel free to contact Jose in my office, with any things that might be needing attention or things hanging or questions, the listserv is still going. And so let's do some of the other work with staff and getting feedback and having some of those discussions through August. And then come back and hit the ground running sometime later in September. All right.
And I'll get the presentation to Jose.
Great.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks.
Great. Okay. Well, 9:15. Let's go ahead and break. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful August.
Well, thanks,
You
Walter.
too.
Have a good
Thank you.
vacation.
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Have a good night.
Night.